We're joined now by the presenter of RN's Health Report and the ABC's very popular Coronacast, Dr. Norman Swan. Norman, good morning. Lay it out for us. Should we be excited here?
Hi, Lisa. Hi, David. Well, I hate to rain on the parade, but there are a couple of things you just need to be careful of. This is a press release, and it's as much a commercial announcement as it is a scientific announcement. So the race is here for the, to have a first mover advantage in the marketplace. Pfizer has not necessarily been a team player in the development of a vaccine. The other vaccine manufacturers that are at the front have shared the same trial protocol. In other words, they're doing their randomized trials in the same kind of a way, which means that when they get the results, it's going to be much easier to compare what they've found with each other and find out which is the best vaccine. Pfizer has not been part of that. So it's not clear what 90% effectiveness actually means in this. And I think that the announcement also acknowledges that. So is it 90% effectiveness at preventing the COVID-19 disease, which is what the regulators want to see, but the rest of us want to see, is it 90% effective at preventing transmission and, in other words, infection in the first place? We don't know that yet. And I suspect all the other manufacturers know exactly the same data as Pfizer. In other words, I think I said this last week, they all know whether it works at the moment. And they haven't gone to a press release, but they've got the data already. Because as you can see from the Pfizer results, it doesn't take very many patients to know that it works. It takes a lot of people to know whether it's safe. And if you go too early for approval, you're not following through the washout period where you're following people for 2 months or so to make sure that it's safe after they've had their last dose. And remember, it's a 2-dose vaccine. So 50 million doses means 25 million people covered.
So that's a really interesting point. The AstraZeneca Oxford University one could be at the same point. They're just not announcing where they're at this point. So what are the steps from here for both Pfizer, for AstraZeneca? I mean, how far away are we from actually seeing approval granted?
Well, we're not very far away. It's probably December. I mean, my understanding is that if you look at the timing of the trials and the washout period to make sure they're safe, it's probably round about December. So we're not far off. I mean, it's a month or so difference. The problem you've got is a political one in the United States where the Trump administration wants to prove that it's done a great job. Of course, Pfizer is not part of the Trump administration's program for vaccines. But Pfizer has said it will go for emergency use authorization. Now, there's a danger in emergency use authorization is that you've not necessarily got all your safety data in, and you're trying to do a jump start on the regulators. And this is where commerce comes in for a commercial advantage as much as a humane advantage of wanting the vaccine out. I'm not saying that they're being cold and calculating necessarily, but commerce does come into this.
When you say emergency use approval, does that emergency use then extend to it being rolled out to all of the countries that have bought into this vaccine?
No, it applies to the United States and the Food and Drug Administration, but it will put pressure on other regulators. So you're actually going to give authorization to this without the full data coming in, and you've already seen this with the Food and Drug Administration. They gave emergency use authorization to convalescent serum, the antibodies from people who've had COVID-19, and it doesn't work. And there was no data to support that. So there's a history here, there's form, if you like, in terms of giving EUA to products that aren't fully evaluated. Now, this vaccine, I'm sure, will be a fine vaccine, but you just got to be, there's trust is a huge issue here, that the community knows that a vaccine is safe. And, luckily, this is one of the vaccines that we've supported, that Greg Hunt has supported here for supply, but luckily we've got other vaccines up our sleeves, such as the Oxford one.
Just on that question, though, Norman, how does it normally work if the US approves a drug? We're not talking about a pandemic situation, but in normal circumstances, if the US approves a drug, what does Australia do to satisfy itself to go through its approval process after that?
Australia goes through its own approval process. The drug companies hate that because they say, well, why don't you just accept what the FDA has done and approve our drug? But in fact, the TGA does its own evaluation. So truckloads of data are shipped into Australia, and the experts go through the data to see whether or not it's valid and whether there are any problems. And it often means that there's a delay in approval in Australia, and some drugs don't get approved in Australia, which have been approved in the United States. So we do our own.
Hey, Norman, just finally, we've already heard from Joe Biden over the last few hours. He's really pushing the wear a mask message, isn't he?
He is. And given his political inability to do anything until the 20th of January, when the epidemic is going to be really out of control, mask wearing is the one thing that will bring down this pandemic to some extent by stopping the spread. Unfortunately, mask wearing has become political and identifies you as a Democrat voter in theory rather than Republican. So it's fraught, whichever way you look, in terms of what Biden does about the coronavirus.
All right, Norman Swan.
Norman, thank you for the reality check on all of this and the caution that you rightly put around it. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.